Imagine a person who always knows what to say, who can diffuse a tense situation, deliver tough news gracefully, is confident without being arrogant, brave but not reckless, generous but never extravagant. Aristotle believed that while rare, these people do exist, and they are what we should all aspire to be. Virtuous. And there's a whole moral theory based on this idea of virtue. But unlike most of the moral theories we've discussed, virtue theory doesn't spend a lot of time telling you what to do. There's no categorical imperative or principle of utility. Instead, virtue theory is all about character. Rather than saying, follow these rules so that you can be a good person, Aristotle and other virtue theorists reasoned that if we can just focus on being good people, the right actions will follow effortlessly. So why should you become a virtuous person? Because eudaimonia. Back when we talked about Aristotle and virtue theory, I brought this up. It describes a life of flourishing, a life in which a person is constantly striving for self-improvement, to be more virtuous, more wise, more thoughtful, and self-aware. Better. This was Aristotle's idea of a life well lived. Aristotle believed in a human essence, that there's a proper way to be a human being, and that will only flourish by finding that path. Aristotle said humans are the rational animal, so living a good human life means seeking to know. Know your world, know yourself, and strive to govern yourself through reason. Work to be the best, most virtuous version of yourself. What exactly does it mean to be virtuous? Aristotle said that having virtue just means doing the right thing at the right time, in the right way, in the right amount toward the right people. According to Aristotle, there's no need to be specific because if you're virtuous, you know what to do all the time. You know how to handle yourself and how to get along with others. You have good judgment. You can read a room and you know what's right and when. Aristotle understood virtue as a set of robust character traits that, once developed, will lead to predictably good behavior. You can think of virtue as the midpoint between two extremes, which Aristotle called vices. Virtue is just the right amount, the sweet spot between the extreme of excess and the extreme of deficiency. And this sweet spot is known as the golden mean. So let's take a look at some particular virtues, starting with courage. What is courage? To take a closer look at this, let's head to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. Walking home from a movie, you see a person being mugged. What is the courageous action for you to take? Your impulse might be to say that a courageous person would run over there and stop the mugging because courage means putting yourself in harm's way for a good cause, right? Well, no. A virtuous person, in the Aristotelian sense, would first take stock of the situation. If you size up the mugger and have a good reason to believe that you could safely intervene, then that's probably the courageous choice. But if you assess the situation and recognize that intervention is likely to mean that both you and the victim will be in danger, the courageous choice is not to intervene, but to call for help instead. According to Aristotle, courage is the midpoint between the extremes of cowardice and recklessness. Cowardice is a deficiency of courage, while recklessness is an excess of courage, and both are bad. Aristotle said that you definitely can have too much of a good thing. So being courageous doesn't mean rushing headlong into danger. A courageous person will assess the situation, they'll know their own abilities, and they'll take action that is right in the particular situation. Part of having courage, he argued, is being able to recognize when, rather than stepping in, you need to find an authority who can handle a situation that's too big for you to tackle alone. Basically, courage is finding the right way to act. Aristotle thought all virtue works like this. The right action is always a midpoint between extremes. So there is no all or nothing in this theory, even honesty. In this view, honesty is the perfect midpoint between brutal honesty and failing to say things that need to be said. Like, no one needs to be told that they have a big zit on their face. They already know. The virtue of honesty means knowing what needs to be put out there and what you should keep quiet about. And it also means knowing how to deliver hard truths gracefully, how to break bad news gently, or to offer criticism in a way that's constructive rather than soul-crushing. The virtue of generosity works the same way. It avoids the obvious vice of stinginess, but also doesn't give too much. It's not generous to give drugs to an addict, or to buy a round of drinks for everyone in the bar when you need that money for rent. The right amount of generosity means giving when you have it to those who need it. It can mean having the disposition to give just for the heck of it, but it also means realizing when you can't or shouldn't give. Your loved ones are all sitting around reminiscing about your life. What are they saying? How will you be remembered? Did you have a good life? How would we know? What constitutes a good life? The first thing to consider is whether the value of a life is determined by the liver of that life or by other people. What if your last thought before you died was that you had had a perfect life, but when your loved ones sit around and discuss it, they all decide that your life was kinda awful? Or run it the other way. What if everyone else thinks your life was amazing, but you die miserable feeling your life was a total waste? Who's right? And which of these two options would you prefer? It's time to examine your own life. And that means asking yourself some big questions, like, are you living the way you think you should? Are you working toward goals you actually care about? How important are these things to you? Right now, the choices you make, the way you spend your time, these things are shaping the type of life you'll lead. So think about what matters. Because, as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Anything you do matters, provided you choose to imbue it with value. Become a doctor and save lives, be a stay-at-home parent and create a beautiful childhood for your kids, be an amazing best friend. Find a career that gives you the space in your life to pursue a hobby you adore. Volunteer your time promoting a cause you care about. Put your energy into amassing a great deal of wealth. Become a champion Scrabble player. Feed squirrels. It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is that it's meaning-making for you.